As you know, we dealt with each of you like a father with his children, urging and encouraging you and pleading that you lead a life worthy of God, who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. And I read that longer section because here Paul has no problem describing his ministry in maternal or paternal terms. He's not hung up on a pronoun. But truly, as mentioned, he is the right pronoun, since the best analogy is that we're all in a feminine relationship to the Lord. And this makes sense. Think of John 15. We're called to bear fruit for God. His seed is planted in us, the seed of the Word of God, Luke 8. It's planted in us, James 1. It grows, and we produce fruit. For Christ is our husband. And so this is a very common biblical metaphor, and that's why so often unfaithful living is compared to adultery, spiritual adultery. You'll see that in James 4, of course, but all throughout both Testaments. For example, Jeremiah and Hosea, Ephesians and Revelation. Let me share a few closing thoughts. First, God is not lonely. I think one reason people imagine that God must have a wife or a girlfriend, or perhaps he's divided and he's somehow masculine and feminine at the same time, is that he would be incomplete otherwise. And I think those people forget how important the doctrine of the Trinity is. That among the persons of the Trinity, there is and has always been eternal love. And so even before humans existed, there was relationship. There's love. How could God be love if he was only one person? And this is not the time to go into the intricacies of the Trinity, the three in one. It's not three gods. It's not just one person. But what the Trinity means for our purposes right now is that God's not lonely, nor has he ever been. He doesn't need a consort. He doesn't need a goddess. Secondly, God is not sexual. And when I say sexual, this is not to say that God is aloof or distant or impersonal, but he's not sexual. He's not male, he's not female. You could say he's beyond sexuality. And yet, third, he is personal. And since we're persons, all of us are persons, we have no choice but to relate to the Lord in a personal way. It can be no other way. Biblically, the best analogy is that God is our Father. You'll find feminine imagery as well. None of it, however, should be interpreted in a sexual way. He's our Father, and we are obedient children. Or corporately, we're the bride of Christ. Either way, he is analogically, but not biologically, masculine. And we are to submit to him. And I think that's the part that probably bothers a lot of people. It's his claim to sovereignty over our lives. But God is not held captive by a pronoun. The whole debate on the gender of God is fundamentally misguided. God is not lonely. He's not a sexual being, and yet he is personal. And we relate to him as our loving parent, as our loving Father. I hope these thoughts are useful as you reach out with the gospel to a world that really doesn't understand.